after 9 months, we started exploring other communities and we started saying to ourselves, like, oh, let's be realists. Even though this community needs income really, really badly, we have to go with a community who's ready. And once we found that community, it happened really quickly. And that's what community power is.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here to another episode of the Mission Driven Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with members of the mission-driven ecosystem, entrepreneurs, accelerators, investment bankers, academics, trying to figure out what does it take to move from impact to scale when it comes to driving through environmental, social, economic challenges that we face in our countries. For me, this is all about moving from inspiration to action through equipment, empowerment, mindset, tool set. And the only way that I've figured out how to do that at scale is to talk to others about the work they're doing, the path they're on, the scale they're seeing, and the challenges they're trying to solve every day. So with that, I'm really excited to be joined by Tara Susanto, the founder of Brubaker. It's a company that's on a mission to conserve, protect, and restore Indonesia's rainforest and uplift socioeconomic living standards through this ecosystem. For me, it's a really interesting platform because what they're trying to do is take biodiversity, but also address the poverty systems, bring those two things together, hopefully find a business model. Maybe they found it, we'll find out through this conversation, but really trying to mix two what are often believed to be distinct issues, but in respect of local communities, local ecosystems, bring those two things together, find a business plan that hopefully over time will come to scale. So with that, Tara, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's really great to have you here to talk about the work that you're doing. As a starting point, it'd be really great to have you introduce yourself and the work that you're doing at Brubaker.
Hi, everyone. And thanks, Rich, for inviting me on this podcast. It's really a great honor to be sitting here and talking to you today. As an introduction, my name is Tara. And what we do essentially at Brubaker is reforest degraded lands in Borneo. And how we do that is through a subscription service that companies pay to us on a monthly basis. And in return, we give them data points such as carbon sequestration rates, seedling survival rates, how much biodiversity has come back into that plot of land. And perhaps most importantly, what people really want to know these days is that how many community members have been impacted as a result.
In your mission statement, you mentioned kind of two core challenges that you're working on. One is Indonesia's rainforest, so biodiversity, reforestation, and the second is more socioeconomic, so poverty alleviation, because these are both very large challenges for Indonesia. What's the roots of the challenge? How big is it? And from there, what's the interconnection that you guys have drawn through this as your mission?
When we started this work, we realized we couldn't look at poverty and the natural degradation separately. Yes, we can separate them in some ways, but there's just so much interconnection that's happening. And part of the degradation that's happening in Borneo, West Kalimantan, is because of enclosing forest converting industries. So you're talking about logging, mines, palm, and the like traditional forest conversion practices, right? And the thing is, the number one person or peoples who are impacted by these activities are usually people who used to live off these forests. So the connection is on a very basic level, is just right there. People who have ancestral lands have been passed down for generations, even before these businesses existed, but they do not have the necessary paperwork to prove that. Then they don't have that legal power or political power to voice out their concerns. So without those papers to prove that this land belongs to them, there's a lot of displacement that happens. And that's where poverty kicks in, because when you lose your home, you lose your foundation, you lose your ability to make money, your ability to. So I think that's where the interconnectedness is, and the depth of the problem. It's very visible, right? Even from satellite images, you can see that we've lost 70% of our rainforests, and we're still losing them.
Can you talk about the founding pain point of Brubaker? Where did you come up with this idea, and what catalyzed you and your partner to come together to work on this?
So we started from carbon trading, and it was pretty straightforward. It was kind of like a buy low, sell high situation. My partner was mostly doing the work. He was mostly doing the trading, but we were selling it to businesses who had net zero goals or who wanted some sustainably branding that is beyond the traditional reduce, reuse, recycle approach,
Yeah.
right? And then we started talking about vintage carbon credits, which is right now like a very arguable topic, but it was something that we were talking about like just 2 years ago when we were starting this, that vintage credits don't make sense to the end customer, because the end customers, they want to save the world now. So why would they ever buy something that was sequestered or offset back in 2015? And the 2015 vintages are still going around. So we start looking into supply, and we start going into these forests ourselves and figuring out how can we actually start making our own project. And then what we discovered was that there are so many significant smallholders who have, let's say, 1 hectare or 2 hectares of ancestral land that do not have any documentation and are under such massive economic pressure for them to be monetized. We started thinking that, okay, these hectares sound small. It's just 1, 2, 3. But then if you create a community model that works, and if you combine, let's say, 100 community members, and that's 100 hectares without having to employ people, like bring them from Java and then put them in Kalimantan and start reforesting. It's actually, you don't have to move anyone around. It's them taking care of their own land, getting back their political and legal power, and finding a regular income. So basically that's where the pain point was. It was kind of just realizing, okay, credits don't really make sense right now. So what can make sense for everyone in that moment?
Well, and I'm curious, like when you're creating this platform, how did this one make better sense? I mean, you're going to be doing more work to talk to 100 people for 300 hectares. You're building something that, was going to be less profitable, less easily to manage. Like, why make that jump? Why not just stay in the vintage? Why not look for larger, plots of land or larger farmers that you could just, platform?
Like, it just seemed like such a huge financial cost when there is a readily made available solution there. If we just took the time and effort to socialize these people, to make them understand the advantages that they can have over the disadvantages that they have been receiving. It's just that no one has ever felt that this was a disadvantage, because they just felt like, oh, okay, this is the only solution I had, is to sell my ancestral land. When we actually did the work, we were so surprised at the amount of ease that came with it. So yes, max 100 people in one village, but also when we did the socialization, when we did the program introduction, and 100 people showed up. It was crazy, 100 people. And this is one village with 3 little sub mini villages. And by the second week, my field ops was saying to me, Tara, can you give us some money to go into the city, because we need to print more registration forms? And I was really surprised. Yeah, I was really, really surprised that
what was bringing them in? Was it just because you're paying them money and they need the money, or?
I think number one, it's definitely the financial benefits. So how it works in Tara is that since it's a subscription service for a monthly basis, that means we have a stream of income that comes into Tara every month, and then we can split some of those income to pay these stakeholders as rent. So it's a basic rent money to not do anything with your land. And then it's an additional labor money if you also help us reforest on that land. We also plant high value vegetation. So we take indigenous practices into account, and we ask them, what kinds of plants do you want to see? And in our area right now, a lot of them are saying like durian, and we're like, oh, great. Durian can grow really big, has big leafy greens, also great carbon sequestration tree. So we add it onto our species list. And the thing is, because it's their land, it's their tree, that gets passed down. Now their kids are not going to want to cut that tree down, because they know this land produces great durian that they can one day sell.
How much of that did you understand you would be participating when you started this? Because I mean,
oh my God, that's a great question. Yeah.
You guys were both really young. I mean, it was like you were kind of like you start up in one area, you pivot into this. Like, how much of this was kind of planned, and how much of it is holy crap? Like, it happened.
Yeah. In order for us to find the right community, it took us 9 months. So we did have a starting plot, but the community wasn't very strong. So sadly, in very vulnerable communities, which actually where the program should thrive, it's still really, really difficult because they don't have basic needs met. They don't have a lot of support from their municipal office either. And that was our first plot. So it was really hard to get things going. So after 9 months, we started exploring other communities, and we started, saying to ourselves, like, okay, let's be realists. Even though this community
Yeah.
needs income really, really badly, we have to go with a community who's ready. And once we found that community who was ready,
Yeah.
it happened really quickly. It was like in 1 month, we could set up all of these educational programs. We could set up more orientation to show them how to actually plant them. And that's what community power is.
Yeah.
It's not Tara and James having to go into the jungle every single week to like tell them what to do. It's about like teaching one group and having that group educate everyone else. But the thing is, I feel that we underestimate, even myself included, we underestimated how primal people connect and communicate in these
Yeah.
communities. It's like, if I don't trust you, I don't trust you, I don't like your
Yeah.
product, we go our separate ways. But if I trust you, I'm going to help you and follow you till the ends of the earth. Like
Yeah.
it's really strong, that kind of word of mouth.
Well, I had
Um,
I had a
yeah.
conversation last night with someone in Africa about how a lot of nonprofits and philanthropists they'll grant money to these local organizations, but in reality they
Mhm.
don't trust them at all. They'll be like they don't believe that actually there's any capacity or any sense of ownership at the local community level. And I'm wondering, was that something that you thought going into this, and what do you have to say about that now?
I think it goes a long way if the founder or the guy on top just goes into the site directly and just does the work.
Yeah.
Like, it takes one day for you to fly to Kalimantan and
Yeah.
sit down with them, have lunch with them, and take a scoop and plant together with them.
Hmm.
And that goes a long way. And so what I think trust here is that people need to see you do the work. They need
Yeah.
to see that you're not just all talk, and that you're willing to get down and dirty with them and actually do the work with them. I think that was really big. And I was surprised by the number of appreciation people felt when they saw that we came down and did the work with them.
Yeah. So actually, I remember you had a quote on LinkedIn that said, "It's been a grueling half year since we started thinking about what we can do beyond carbon credits at Terra.
Yeah.
And since then, we've been through so many adjustments." What's the process of being an entrepreneur been like for you? I mean, again,
Mhm.
young entrepreneur, first at bat. What's this process been like for you personally? And
Okay.
what have you learned? What have you gone through? What are the
Mm.
lessons that you take away from this last 2 years? Like, wow, you know, like
Yeah.
this has been
Yeah.
quite the journey.
Yeah, I think nothing humbles you more than starting your own business. This is cliche. They say, like, fail fast, then succeed faster. But it really is true. Like,
Right.
you just gotta make sure that, I feel that everybody in life has a quota for failing. It's a question
Hmm.
of whether or not you want to fail early on in life or like later on in life. And man,
Right.
I don't want to be failing when I'm 50. Like, while I have the energy while I have the energy to do that, I might as well fail
Yeah.
now. So I think everything is basically a 99% chance of failing anyway. So you should
Might as well
just
have
go
fun.
for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you might as well have fun and just go for it. And be honest about your journey, because it's not going
Yeah.
to help anyone if you don't share the fact that you fail like almost on a daily
Yeah.
basis. Like, get
How
better.
open can you be about your failures? I mean, I've been talking about my
Oh,
burnouts and failures for a number of years
yeah.
because I don't
Yeah.
care. Honestly, like I've been told so many times, like, do not
Hmm.
share this. Show
Hmm.
positivity,
Oh,
have the
yeah.
growth mindset. Like,
Oh,
but is
yeah.
that realistic? And do you think like putting things out like it's been grueling? Do you think that that's hurting you? Do you think that's the right thing to do?
Hmm.
Like, how do you put that into perspective?
I think on social media, I'd probably go with like a 80-20 principle. Like, 20% of your time post your failures, and then 80% of the time post your
Mm,
successes, because that's just how, I guess, social media and how
Yeah.
people work, right? And the
Right.
thing is, people talk about growth mindset all the time, but
Yeah.
they don't say that there is no growth without failures. I personally believe that if you're vulnerable about your failures, then
Hmm.
others who see your vulnerability just trust you so much more. And then
Mm.
also realize that, oh, if Tara can fail, then it's probably fine
It's
that I
okay.
fail too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Right.
you just kind of create this culture where you're constantly inviting others to try and join the work.
Yeah.
You're not making it intimidating for others to join sustainability, which is
Yeah.
such an intimidating work, like
Right.
you see
Right.
everyone posting on LinkedIn and it's all about like CCUs, or someone's coming up with like a really crazy
Right.
like EV battery that lasts like 50 years. And like all of this stuff is so intimidating. And for the
Mm.
ordinary person who only knows how to recycle their shopping bags, it's like, how do I
Yeah.
even start? How do I even contribute? So I feel like,
Yeah.
especially in the sustainability industry, you have to be vulnerable about these things, because this
Yeah.
is the hardest thing that humanity has ever had to do. And so it makes sense that we are
Yeah.
gonna fail, and we're gonna like find this
So
pretty
what are
difficult.
your stages of accepting your failing to learning
Hmm.
from that? Does it start with ice cream in a screen
Okay.
bottle? Like what's your process? Like when the wheels are coming
Okay.
off,
Yeah.
how do you one recognize that you're going the wrong way or that you're failing or however you want to frame
Hmm.
that? And then what's the
Okay.
process for getting back on track?
So on a micro things, it's like, don't even sweat it, just like
Yeah.
automatic, right? But on like the bigger things, like things that you have already invested time in, like especially that first pilot project where everything was just going south.
Yeah.
We were 9 months in paying our field ops. We bought tools and everything. It was like a moment of like, it was like a bang realization where I thought like, we have to cut our losses and just pack up and leave. And that was actually when one of my team members sat me down and just told me what was going on, just became super vulnerable. And that was what made me go like, I have to stop this insanity. Like it's too much. If my team members were not brave enough to come to me and
Hmm.
tell me that, I would have never been able to realize that I needed to stop then and there. So
Yeah.
that process to me was like, I didn't even have time to console myself. It was crisis mode. It was like, definitely was a mistake on me and James' part for letting this like run for like too long. But we didn't even have
Sure.
time to lick our wounds. So we were like, okay, pack up
Yeah.
the ice cream, we eat it on the way. And
Right.
honestly, I think in the short term, when you're dealing with a mistake that is looking like a crisis, that's all you can do. And
Yeah.
then once
But
the storms kind
how
of like
many
settle down. Mhm.
how many of those do you look back at 6 months ago and go, that wasn't even a crisis,
Oh my God, that's such a great question. That's
right?
such a great question. Yeah, you're right.
Because you really think that you're going through
Yeah,
hell, but actually you were nowhere near. Like it wasn't
yeah.
even a big problem. It was one of those things that should have just been automatic. Like, do you find that over time you get better at turning what used to be a big crisis into something like, ah, we've been through that 3 times, no problem.
Yeah. I mean, like, definitely when I'm dealing with a problem,
Hmm.
I don't even see them as failures anymore, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even label them fail. Like, it's not even like a word in my internal lexicon anymore. Like,
Sure.
it's just part of something that you have to do. Like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when you rest in the weekends, that's when you reconcile with your feelings and like,
Mm.
okay, this is how I felt about it, but that's okay because I'm already doing the next step.
How important is your idealism and passion for the topic to get you through those tough times though? Like I remember on
Mm.
your website you say something like you're two mission driven people. I mean, is that
Mm-hmm.
what propels you through these hard you've mentioned two different
Mm-hmm.
pivots. I mean, is that what gets you going? Is that you're mission driven? You're very clear about what you want to do. You just haven't quite worked out the exact business plan, the exact
Mm-hmm.
program, or the exact partnership?
I don't think it's passion that's kind of driving me this, because I feel I have
Mm.
run on passion before and that burns out. Getting up and be like, oh, I love what I do. Like, it's simply not sustainable to get up every day and love what you do, because in any kind of work, even the work that you like doing, you're going to come into situations and people and problems that you just hate so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So I think centering our motivation on mission makes it like a discipline. It makes
Hmm.
it like, you got to do this, because if you don't do this, then who else will? Or more
Yeah.
like, you know, this is what's needed to be done. And then the thing is like, if not this work, then what else would I be doing? So I think
Right.
that whole, I mean, definitely
Mm.
first year was all about like, oh, passion, excitement, new possibilities. But I think
Yeah.
going to the second year, we're starting to realize that discipline is at the core of any success.
All right. Last question. If you're talking to an aspiring entrepreneur today, someone young, bubbly, full of energy,
Mhm.
running at the world, ready to
Yeah.
launch something, what are the two or three things that you'd give them to make their launch a little bit easier?
Don't sweat about thinking about competitors, number one,
Mm,
because if you're truly starting something new and what you feel is unique, what you feel is true to you, it will be very, very difficult to find competitors who do exactly what you do. That's number one.
mm,
And number two, even if you do see someone as your competitor, don't just don't think about what they do.
yeah.
You can see what they're doing on social media and see what they're doing from time to time, but you don't have to be so obsessed about them. I
Mm,
think a mistake that we made in the beginning was worry so much about how we were perceived within the carbon community, because that's how we started, right? Carbon. But now that we're more into nature, ecosystem restoration, community
mm,
restoration, we don't even look at the carbon markets in that way
right.
anymore, so
Right.
it's like, oh, we've become something of our own. And
Right.
working on that, working on yourself and what you're doing is so much more valuable than spending your time thinking about what others may think of you or how you fit
Yeah.
in into the industry economics.
There was a great quote I heard one time that you never put more points on the board by looking at the scoreboard. You only
Mm,
put more points on the board by playing the game, right? And
yeah, I love
it's
that.
funny, like when you mention those two things, I'm like, you do spend some time on that.
Yeah.
And I've been there. I'm not judging at all. Like it's sometimes it's really hard, especially when you're going through a struggle, you're going
Hmm.
through a pivot, and you're like, shit, like they made it happen.
Yeah.
And at some
Uh-huh.
point, you're like, wait a second, I just need to make progress. And at some point,
Uh-huh.
someone's going to look at mine and go, hey, they made that happen. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's done the work, right? And looking at a scoreboard is not working. Looking at the mirror in the gym is not working. Like you need to make sure that you're really putting the time in. And again, that's why I love telling these stories. That's why I really appreciate your time, because I know you do have better things to be doing than to be sitting on a podcast, yapping and thinking about things. But you've got a lot to do, so I appreciate your time.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I mean, it's good for me too. Talking sometimes reminds me
Yeah.
why I do this in the first place. So it's a good centering. It can be a good centering activity
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Well, when you run a podcast of entrepreneurs, you get very centered as an entrepreneur about this path. So, it is a shared journey. I call it the beautiful pain. And
The beautiful pain. Yeah.
we'll get there eventually.